Hello and welcome to The Remote Revolution, a podcast by Virtual Mojo. This is where we explore how modern businesses are transforming the way they work through remote teams, virtual support, and smarter operational strategies. In each episode, we bring you insights, conversations, and practical ideas to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and growing companies build efficient, scalable, and future-ready organizations. If you're looking to work smarter, scale faster, and unlock the power of remote talent, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
So imagine hiring a brilliant, highly vetted, like 5-star web developer.
Okay.
They are absolute rock stars at code. But because you treated them like an executive assistant and asked them to, manage your daily calendar and filter your morning emails.
Oh, no.
Yeah, your entire product launch just goes up in flames.
Right.
And usually when a failure like that happens, right, a missed deadline, a botched project, a total communication breakdown, we point the finger straight at the person doing the job.
We assume we just hired the wrong talent.
Exactly. But what if the vast majority of the time when remote support falls apart, you actually hired the exact right person, but put them in a structure destined to fail?
Yeah. I mean, it is a sobering reality for a lot of business owners. The idea that the talent was perfect, the vetting was flawless, but the house still burned to the ground because the blueprint was drawn in the dark.
And that brings us to the core of our deep dive today. We are venturing into the surprisingly complex, often incredibly frustrating world of remote hiring.
There is a lot to unpack here.
There really is. We've gathered this fascinating stack of sources today. Operational research, industry case studies, structural breakdowns of remote workforces. And our mission for you listening is to decode the critical differences between 3 distinct models of remote support.
Right. Freelancers, virtual assistants, and managed remote employees.
Exactly. Because right now, the business world has this really dangerous tendency to throw all 3 of these incredibly different operational structures into a single bucket.
A very murky bucket labeled just remote help.
Right. The classic catch-all. You realize you are drowning in work, you go online, you search for remote help, and you just assume that any warm body on a keyboard has you covered.
Yeah, and making that distinction is vital. When you lump fundamentally different working models together like that, operational disaster isn't just a possibility, it is practically guaranteed.
Because the structural differences aren't understood, you run into massive, deeply expensive friction. The research we're looking at today tracks exactly how this plays out in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Wildly inconsistent communication, outputs that miss the mark completely, and worst of all, work that has to be entirely redone from scratch by the person who outsourced it in the first place.
Yeah, and that data perfectly sets the stakes for this deep dive. When a remote hire goes wrong, the research shows it's almost never a failure of talent.
It's a failure of the model.
Exactly. You might have found a brilliant, capable worker, but you placed them into an entirely wrong structural framework for what the business actually needed to accomplish.
Right.
It's like putting a world-class Formula One driver into a combine harvester.
Oh, I like that.
And then being angry that they aren't setting lap records, The talent is there. The vehicle is entirely wrong for the terrain.
So let's unpack the mechanics of this,
Yeah.
because to really understand how this goes off the rails, we have to start where almost everyone begins their remote hiring journey.
The gateway drug to remote work.
Exactly. The freelancer.
The quintessential starting point for a growing enterprise, or really just an overwhelmed professional. I think looking at the operational breakdowns in our stack, the defining characteristic of a freelancer is that they are purely project-based.
Right.
You are bringing them in to execute a specific bounded task with a very clear beginning and end.
So we are talking about designing a new landing page, auditing an SEO strategy, or producing a specific batch of graphic assets.
Precisely. And the structural reality governing a freelancer is profound independence.
Mm-hmm.
They operate autonomously, they set their own schedules, and crucially, they're juggling multiple clients simultaneously.
Right. Your business is not their sole priority.
No, not at all. You occupy a specific temporary slice of their overall bandwidth.
Which brings some incredible advantages. I mean, the case studies highlight that the massive upside of the freelancer model is flexibility and pure speed.
Oh, for sure.
You don't have to onboard them into your intricate company culture. You bypass the heavy lifting of setting up payroll systems or benefits or...
Long-term retention strategies.
Right? You just find a specific need, you hire a specific skill, and they can theoretically start executing on that project the very same day.
Yeah, but the flip side of that coin, however, is a complete lack of workflow control.
Right.
Because freelancers are independent contractors by nature, the client cannot dictate how they structure their Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
They aren't fully integrated into your daily business operations. Their responsiveness and consistency will inherently fluctuate based on, well, their overall workload and the shifting priorities of those other clients sharing their bandwidth.
So, to help visualize the mechanics of this, hiring a freelancer is honestly it's like calling a plumber.
Okay, yes.
Your kitchen sink is leaking, so you call the professional. They arrive, they look at the exact pipe you pointed at, they wrench it tight, they hand you an invoice, and they drive away.
Job done.
Right. But if you hire that same plumber to guard your building, the building gets robbed.
Yeah.
Not because the plumber is lazy, but because their entire skill set and operational model is based around fixing a localized acute problem, not maintaining a continuous ambient state of security.
That distinction between acute problem solving and ambient maintenance is where businesses misapply the model.
Big time.
The plumber, the freelancer, offers such a fast, satisfying win that founders get intoxicated by the relief.
Yeah, they get that dopamine hit.
Exactly. They experience that hit of dopamine from a quickly resolved project and think, wow, this person is amazing. I should just have them run my daily operations.
Hey, plumber, while you're here fixing the sink, can you also manage my inbox and handle customer returns?
Right.
It sounds absurd when we say it out loud, but the sources show this happens constantly. Why do intelligent professionals keep falling into this specific trap?
Well, it's because the friction of sourcing talent is so high. Once you find someone competent, the temptation to hold on to them and stretch their role is just overwhelming. But forcing a freelancer into ongoing day-to-day operations breaks the machine.
Right.
The freelancer's structural need for independence fundamentally conflicts with a business's need for synchronous operational consistency.
Meaning they don't match up.
No. A functioning business needs to know that at 9:00 a.m. every single morning, the customer support queue is cleared. A freelancer expects the freedom to clear that queue at 2:00 a.m. on a Sunday if that fits their personal workflow better.
It's oil and water. The mechanisms just don't mesh.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the natural evolution in our sources. Once the friction becomes unbearable and the business realizes the freelancer cannot run their daily machinery, they pivot.
They go looking for dedicated, ongoing support.
Right. And that brings us to the second model in our deep dive, the virtual assistant, or VA.
Now, this is where the operational landscape gets significantly more complex. The virtual assistant is specifically designed to handle those day-to-day ambient support tasks that freelancers actively avoid. Based on the industry data we are reviewing, VAs are deployed for routine data entry, schedule management, basic inbox triaging, and frontline customer interactions.
The grinding, repetitive gears that keep a business moving forward. And unlike the freelancer who dips in and out asynchronously, the VA is heavily integrated into the daily workflow.
Yes.
They have a company email address, they're in the Slack channels, they're showing up every day.
They are present, yes. But the sources point out a massive, often invisible trap here, and it centers on the mechanism of management.
Okay.
Most virtual assistants are entirely self-managed entities operating in a vacuum.
Wait, hold on though. Let me push back on this for a second on behalf of everyone listening.
Sure.
If I'm paying a premium, to a platform or a marketplace for a supposedly top-tier VA, shouldn't they be proactive enough to just figure out my systems? If I'm hiring them specifically for operations, why is it on me to babysit them and build out the entire structure? Shouldn't a good VA just absorb into my existing workflow?
You would think so, right? But that is the exact assumption that leads to the highest failure rates in remote hiring. Yeah, because the reality of business ecosystems is that you are buying a person's time. You are not buying a pre-built process.
Oh, I see.
Unless you have meticulously documented standard operating procedures, SOPs for every single scenario, the VA has literally nothing to absorb into. You haven't hired a mind reader.
Right.
If an email comes in from an angry client requesting a refund that falls slightly outside your normal policy, the VA doesn't have the institutional context to make a nuanced judgment call.
So they either freeze and do nothing, or they just guess and make a really costly mistake.
Precisely. And in both scenarios, who has to step in?
The business owner.
Right. The business owner has to step in, perform quality assurance, fix the error, and then explain the nuance. So the outcome you get from a virtual assistant depends almost entirely on the quality of the management you provide.
Yeah.
You have to train them, you have to audit their output constantly, you have to motivate them, and you have to write those SOPs.
So you haven't outsourced a department to buy yourself freedom. You've just bought yourself a second full-time job as a middle manager.
Exactly.
The hidden time cost of QA and context switching. You think you were buying back your time, but you were just trading execution time for management time. The cognitive load doesn't actually decrease.
The cognitive load often increases because managing someone else's work requires a different, often more exhausting type of mental energy than just doing the work yourself.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, the operational research highlights a severe structural vulnerability, the single point of failure. When you hire a standalone VA, everything routes through one individual sitting at a desk in their own home.
And if their local power grid goes down, or they get the flu, or they just, decide to take another job without notice,
that work just stops.
There's no underlying system to catch the falling plates. All the institutional knowledge and bespoke training you poured into that one person instantly walks out the door.
You are immediately back to square one with the added burden of a massive backlog.
Wow. Okay, so synthesizing where we are on this journey. The freelancer is too detached. They're the acute problem solver, great for a quick fix, terrible for ambient maintenance.
Right.
But the VA requires an exhausting level of hands-on management.
Yeah.
You bought their time, but you're spending all of your own time building the ecosystem around them.
Yes.
If both of these models create so much friction, what is the third option?
Well, this is where the sources introduce the concept of the managed remote employee.
Okay.
And the core differentiator here isn't the geographic location of the worker or even their specific skill set. The differentiator is structure.
Structure. Okay, this feels like the paradigm shift in the material. You aren't just hiring a human being anymore. You are acquiring a managed operational setup.
That is the exact mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
When you engage a managed remote employee, typically through a specialized remote staffing organization or an agency, you are paying for the infrastructure that surrounds the talent.
So you are buying the ecosystem, not just the individual.
Think about the mechanics of how that changes the day-to-day reality. This setup includes built-in supervision. There is a layer of management between you and the worker. It includes standardized reporting metrics, strict accountability protocols, and dedicated performance tracking managed by the agency, not by you.
So the burden of QA, the endless auditing of daily tasks, shifts off the shoulders of the business owner.
Exactly.
And the result of that, according to the case studies, is that the output finally achieves true consistency. The communication is governed by protocol, not just whenever the worker feels like checking in.
Right.
And because the performance is measurable by a third party, you remove the emotional friction of having to discipline or correct the worker yourself.
It solves the management trap. But even more importantly, it solves the VA's single point of failure problem through systemic redundancy. Well, if a managed individual gets sick, takes a vacation, or leaves the role entirely, the agency has a backup mechanism in place. The processes are already documented centrally, cross-trained staff are available in reserve, and the work continues seamlessly without the client ever having to scramble to put out a fire.
I want to extend that security guard analogy we used earlier because it perfectly illustrates the how behind this model.
Okay, let's hear it.
Hiring a virtual assistant is like hiring a lone security guard to stand outside your warehouse. They might be a fantastic, highly attentive guard, but if they catch a cold and don't show up, your warehouse is completely unprotected.
Yep.
And the only way you know they're doing a good job is if you personally drive by at 2 a.m. to make sure they are awake. The burden of vigilance is still entirely on you.
You own the risk.
Exactly. But hiring a managed remote employee is like hiring a full-scale commercial security firm. You get the guard, yes, but you also get the systemic infrastructure.
The cameras, the dispatchers.
Yeah, the dispatchers checking in on the guard's radio every hour, the field supervisor who does the random midnight QA rounds.
Right.
And the cross-trained backup guard who is automatically dispatched if the primary guard calls in sick.
Right.
You are buying the entire ambient state of security, not just one person holding a flashlight.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And when we connect the mechanics of that analogy to the broader business landscape, it fundamentally changes the nature of reliance.
How do you mean?
Well, the vulnerability of the VA model is that you are depending on human nature, which is inherently unpredictable. When you shift to a managed remote model, you are relying on a robust, engineered process.
Process over person.
Exactly. From a pure business continuity standpoint, transitioning from relying on individuals to relying on systems is the exact inflection point where a business goes from merely surviving to actually being able to scale.
It's the transition from constant low-level panic to actual operational peace of mind.
Yes.
So, looking at the real-world perspective in our sources, how do we see businesses actually navigating these three distinct models? Do they just pick one from the start, or is there a progression?
The operational research outlines a very distinct, almost universal evolutionary timeline. It's an expensive learning curve that most founders and managers have to experience firsthand.
Okay, walk us through it.
Phase one almost always begins with freelancers. A business is strapped for cash, they lack internal processes, and they need specialized execution immediately. They jump on a platform, hire independent talent, and secure those quick wins.
But the friction starts when they try to stretch those piece rate workers into daily operations, resulting in, chaotic, asynchronous communication and dropped balls.
Which forces them into phase two. They realize they need synchronous daily presence, so they try the virtual assistant model.
Right.
They secure the dedicated hours, but within months, the founder is completely bogged down in context switching. They're spending their weekends writing SOPs and their mornings double-checking the VA's inbox replies.
They've essentially traded executing the work for the heavier cognitive load of managing the worker.
Exactly. The trap closes. Which brings them, usually out of sheer exhaustion, to phase three. The realization that they don't just need a person, they need a process. They move to the managed model, and suddenly the outputs become predictable because the underlying system absorbs the friction of human unpredictability.
So if we synthesize this data, the operational cheat sheet for anyone looking to optimize their support structure looks basically like this.
Yeah.
Right? First, the freelancer. The mechanism is acute problem solving.
Right. Task-focused, highly flexible, independent, and completely unsuitable for daily ambient maintenance.
Second, the virtual assistant. The mechanism is unmanaged time. They provide ongoing daily presence, but they operate in a vacuum, requiring heavy, continuous management and SOP development from the client.
And third, the managed remote employee. The mechanism is structural redundancy. They are dedicated, they operate within a strict pre-built supervisory framework, and they are performance-driven by an ecosystem you do not have to personally oversee.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to audit your own workflow. Look at the friction points in your current projects or your business. Where are you spending an unreasonable amount of cognitive energy?
That's the real test.
Are you constantly chasing someone down for an asynchronous update? You might be misusing a freelancer. Are you exhausted from rewriting emails that someone else was supposed to draft? Or terrified of what happens if your assistant takes a week off?
You might be trapped in the VA management cycle.
Exactly. The question you have to ask yourself is, which of these three models are you currently trying to force to work in a terrain it wasn't engineered for?
It is the ultimate diagnostic question. Because the most profound takeaway from this entire stack of research isn't about the geographic location of talent or the specific platforms used to find them.
Right.
The differentiator that dictates success or failure is entirely about the mechanism of management.
It completely reframes the narrative around remote work. Outsourcing isn't just some geographic arbitrage hack for cutting payroll costs.
No, not at all.
I mean, yes, the financial leverage is real, but if you deploy the wrong model, the hidden time costs, the QA burdens, and the operational bottlenecks will cost you triple in the long run.
Without a doubt.
To actually achieve the leverage that remote work promises, you have to prioritize structural integrity over raw talent alone. Understanding the granular differences between the freelancer, the self-managed VA, and the managed remote ecosystem is really the only way to protect your time and your operational sanity.
It is the only way to ensure that when you finally find that perfect talent, you have actually built an environment where they can succeed rather than a structure that guarantees their failure.
It stops you from burning down the house because you tried to use a hammer to install a window.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the architecture of remote hiring, I want to leave you, the listener, with a completely different angle to ponder.
Yeah, this is a fascinating thought.
Right. We've spent this entire time talking about how to structure human talent. but consider the rapidly accelerating curve of artificial intelligence.
Oh, for sure. It changes everything.
Exactly. As AI agents become increasingly capable of automating the acute, project-based tasks of freelancers.
And effortlessly handling the routine data entry and inbox triaging of VAs.
Yeah, the actual doing of the work is going to commoditize.
Absolutely.
When the tasks themselves are automated, the only thing left of value will be the management of the system itself.
That's a really powerful point.
So, are you currently building a business that relies entirely on human task execution? Or are you building an adaptable, managed system that can plug into whatever the future of work looks like?
Thank you for listening to The Remote Revolution. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with other professionals who are building the future of work. To learn more about how Virtual Mojo helps businesses grow with highly trained virtual assistants and remote support teams, visit www.virtualmojo.com. For inquiries or collaborations, reach out to us at contact@virtualmojo.com. Until next time, keep building smarter systems and embracing the future of work.